Welcome into the Illini Inquirer podcast. It is Jeremy Werner and Joey Wagner. Today, we continue our position preview series, and we stay in the trenches. Offensive line, defensive line today. This is where games are won. I think outside the quarterback position, this is the most important podcast we are doing here, Joey Wagner. And just to let people know, we were trying to get this out Monday. A lot of internet issues at home. So we decided to scrap the 20 minutes or so that we did, and we're going to do a better one today anyway. Plus, we learned a little bit today at early morning practice, a little bit more about the offensive line, and got to see a little bit more physicality between the offensive line and defensive line. So I feel like today's going to be a better podcast anyway, Joey.
Yeah, I hope so. I full disclosure, I was off to a terrible start the last time, so it was good to get a bit of a restart there and see a little bit today at practice, Jeremy, and we'll talk to Brett Bielema later tonight. We're recording this on a Tuesday, so we'll have any more updates on the website, but we did learn a little bit today.
Yeah, and we're going to have media day later today. It's where we have access to every player on the team. Like Joey and I aren't going to be able to talk to every player, but we like to try and chat with every freshman, get to know a little bit more about them, and then sink into some players that maybe we haven't been able to talk to so far this year and get some more insight on them. So a lot of stuff coming to Illini Inquirer. If you're not a VIP member, the rest of this month is the time to sign up, guys. It's our kickoff sale for fall camp, 50% off, more than $60 of savings. If you want the most insight on Illinois football and basketball, go ahead and do that if you're not already a VIP member. Or you can sign up for $1 and get your first month for just $1 and try us out. And hey, once you're done with your promo period, that it includes Paramount Plus with your deal, which now includes all of UFC. So if you're into that, once your promo period is done, whether that's a year or a month, you get access to Paramount Plus as well. So it's another really good part of that VIP subscription that you get from Illini Inquirer. But Joey, before we dive into the offensive line and defensive line, I do want to mention the AP poll came out yesterday, and for the first time since 2008, the Illini are in the AP top 25 preseason poll. For the first time since 1990, they're in the top 15 of that poll. Pretty good stuff for Illinois, number 12. And again, Joe, it just shows that there is a lot of national hype about this team, and makes sense with all the returners you have, the stars you have, and Luke Altmaier and Gabe Ackes, Xavier Scott. I think Matthew Bailey deserves to be in that conversation. All your offensive line being back. This is a team that should have that kind of hype. Of course, when you go through the history of Illinois and being in the AP top 25, it's not a great history. One, they're not there that often, but also out of the last 11 times Illinois has been the AP top 25, they've only finished in the AP top 25 twice. So preseason AP top 25 does not always go well with success for Illinois in the long term of that season. But that's why Brett Bielema is here, to kind of rewrite that script and have Illinois succeed when they are expected to succeed.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. And that's why there's like the fan base, there's part of the fan base that's really excited. Ranked number 12, which is about kind of in the neighborhood, Jeremy, we thought 12 to 15, 16, 17 would have probably been a window for Illinois. And then there's the other part of the fan base who has said, hey, we've seen this before. And now it's Brett Bielema and his team. Like, they're not responsible for those past teams that didn't live up to those preseason rankings. But that's what he was brought here to do. Sustain success. You've heard it from him, from Josh Whitman, hundreds of times by this point, right? And that's Brett Bielema's a guy who's here to kind of turn that tide, to turn the page away from some of those tough seasons of the past and see if he can do it. The talent's there. The returners are there. The coaching staff is back. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for optimism, but I do understand those of you who are maybe a little bit hesitant right now or a little bit nervous because you've been hit before.
Yeah, I've said it before. Like, obviously, Illinois fans are going to fight for their team. They're going to want them ranked higher. So for anybody that didn't have them ranked, they're going to go after those people, and they should, because
that is a little much for me, right? Like, it's a 10-win team that returns 16 starters. There's got to be somewhere in the top 25. If you don't want to put them at 12 or 15 or 18, that's fine. But to think that's not one of the 25 best teams, that is a reach for me.
But I've told you, like, whether it was Big Ten Media Days or what we're seeing nationally in the AP poll, right? It's like, it feels like there's less caution about Illinois at the large scale, nationally, regionally, than there is locally. There is a little hesitancy because I think people have that history of Illinois football. Their best seasons have come when it's unexpected. The disappointing ones have been when you are expected to do well, Illinois hasn't done well. But I agree with you. That's what Brett Bielema was brought here to do. And the coaching staff gives me a lot of faith that they can live up to those expectations. Having veterans that were here during the disappointing 23 season, I think helps them a lot.
Having a quarterback.
Having a quarterback. You have a quarterback that's returning, kind of like Jeff George in 1989, right? Like you have some returning pieces that give you a lot of faith that, you can get this done at the most important places. Offensive line, obviously Gabe Akis, the secondary, and then, of course, your quarterback. So that's why there should be a lot of optimism. But that's about where I expected Illinois to be. And you're going to have to work to maintain that ranking because Duke is not an easy opponent. They received some votes in this poll after a 9-win season, netting a very good transfer quarterback. And week 4, heading to Indiana. Indiana is ranked, again, number 20. And USC got votes. Ohio State is top 3 in this poll. So the beginning of the schedule is not easy. Like, there are some games Illinois definitely will win, but there's some difficult games and some big early tests for a team that's going to be dealing with expectations. And that's what this season is all about. How do you play with those expectations? How do you sustain success? Can you do it?
Yeah, here's the thing. Illinois fans, Illinois is going to get its answer earlier. By September 20th, you're going to know a lot about this Illinois team. And I think that Indiana game's got a lot of fun potential written all over it. Like, Bloomington is all the way behind Kurt Signetti. They're all the way in. They've kind of taken a little bit of that brashness, that personality trait that he has. He's been really successful with. That's going to be a fun environment. It's fun. Like, it's such a small portion of the fan base at large, but it's fun to see our message board. Like, can you believe what Indiana's saying about Illinois? And Indiana's over there like, what is it with Illinois? So there's like a nice, fun back. I don't really know how fun. It's fun to observe the back and forth between the two programs are two programs that are really fighting for that 4th Big Ten team footing, right? Like, that is a very fun game.
Fighting for that respect, right? Like, I sat there and I went to Jeff Rabjohns at Media Day and I said, hey, look at us. Who would have thought? 2 teams with really high expectations in football going into the year. So for both those teams, I think it's a prove-it game, kind of like Illinois-Nebraska was last year. And I think Kansas and the Duke games really mirror each other too, of 2 teams that have some expectations, 2 teams that are basketball schools that are trying to sustain success in football. So I think it does have a lot of similarities to last year's first 4 games where Illinois came out clean, right? 4-0. Really didn't have a lot of major injuries last year. So if you could duplicate that, you're setting yourself up for another very, very good year. And to kind of transition into what we're going to talk about today, offensive and defensive line, I think those games are great tests for either side of the group, either side of the line of scrimmage, because Duke's defensive front is really good. Manny Diaz runs some really good stuff. So I think that could be like an uglier game. Like, I think it's going to maybe a defensive focus game. And then Indiana, Illinois, I think has a chance to be a shootout because Indiana's offense, what they run, their system, they got a really good quarterback in Francisco Mendoza. So I think about the defensive backs. Also, that defensive line, slowing their run game and getting after the quarterback is going to be important. So I think it kind of is 2 big tests in different ways for Illinois in the line of scrimmage to start off the season. But Joey, let's talk about the offensive line. Returns 5 starters. Let's dive into our position preview here with them. Nice season last year. Didn't start great, but it ended incredibly well. They're able to run over Michigan, able to run over South Carolina, of course, Northwestern in there as well. Phenomenal performance by them. But it felt like after J.C. Davis and Melvin Priestley were being worked in, that group got some consistency, found an identity late in the season. Obviously, we're taking it. They got it taken to them against Penn State. Struggled more than they expected to against Central Michigan, but they really did well, especially in the run game late in the season. Got a little bit better pass protecting Luke Altmaier. But to get all 5 starters back, what a huge thing for Bart Miller, for Brett Bielema, and Barry Loney. Because J.C. Davis is an NFL prospect, and you get him back for a year you didn't expect to have him with that Pavia ruling. Melvin Priestley, one of the great finds of the transfer portal that Brett Bielema has had in his time here at Illinois. And Josh Geske and Josh Kreutz are both 3-year starters, in-state guys, kind of that tough, smart, dependable mantra. They live up to it. And then Brandon Henderson is sending talent who stole the starting job midway through last year from Zy Chrysler, who's now a starter at Colorado. It's a damn good thing to bring all 5 of those guys back, Joey.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. That's why there's optimism about what the offense could be beyond simply bringing back Luke Altmaier, which is a big deal, is the way that they ran the ball to close the season last year. You saw Aiden Lawford run behind an offensive line and build his confidence, which a really, really big performance against Northwestern, and then probably an overlooked but really good performance against South Carolina and making defenders miss. So bringing those guys back gives you a high floor, I think. We will get into the biggest step forward that we want to see from those guys. Can we do that now? Because I think that's
I do want to hit on one more thing, but I kind of want to break these guys down a little bit. Like JC Davis came in as a known pass protector. That translated really well from the group of 5 level to the Big Ten level. You didn't mention JC Davis so much in pass protection, and that's a very good thing. Sure, he's going to get beat a couple times, but I thought he was pretty dang consistent as a pass protector, and great piece to have on the blind side of Luke Altmaier. Melvin Priestley's a beast in the run game. You almost got to hold him back sometimes. You don't want to, because he is just so powerful, so athletic. Maybe not the longest guy, probably a guard at the next level, but I think he's got NFL potential. So to get 2 tackles like that in the portal in the same year, absolute grand slam for Bart Miller and Brett Bielema and the staff. But then I thought Josh Gesky had some ups and downs, but I thought he took a step forward last year, became better, especially in the run game late in the year. Josh Kreutz, I think, sneakily got better, especially as the season went along and he was fully healthy. And then Henderson, you see the potential. You saw the inconsistencies you'd expect from a first-time starter, but the athleticism, power, like it excites you about what he could be this season for him. Feels like it's all about, doing that consistently time after time. But all of these guys, Joey, you feel like are going to have NFL contracts at some point, as long as Henderson continues it. But I expect Gesky and Kreutz to at least get into a camp next year. And I expect JC Davis to get drafted. And I think Melvin Priestley's in for a big year.
Yeah, Melvin Priestley, Torrey Cox, we talked about a lot on the defensive side. Him and Melvin Priestley were the 2 biggest, probably got more than you expected from the outside looking in, portal additions last year. Like, we thought Melvin Priestley was a depth guy when they took him. I mean, you take an offensive lineman.
You thought Chrysler and Henderson would start on the right side, right?
Yeah, especially you take a guy from Grambling who, had moments, but also had just mounting penalties, an absurd amount of those. And he ends up being one of your better offensive linemen and no doubt starter, plays just with so much physicality. He cut those penalties down a ton last season. You'd like to see him bring them down a little bit more. 15 yards is as good of 100, right? And in the Big Ten. But I thought he really overperformed with those winner expectations from the outside were last season. Josh Kreutz is just, I think right? Like, you just know exactly what you're going to get out of Josh Kreutz. It's probably more in terms of the mental part of it that he can elevate even higher. I think physically it's probably about where he's going to be for the most part, but he can play better with the knowledge, kind of diving in deeper to some of the intricacies of the center play and the calls and doing all those things. But I feel like I know what Josh Kreutz is going to bring to Illinois.
Which is incredibly valuable at that position, right? Just incredible. Like, that position is so important. He makes all the protection calls on the line, and to have that level of communicator, obviously his football upbringing, Olin Kreutz, there's nobody better to learn center play from, and all the intricacies that go into, blocking up this fit or blocking up this pass rush. Like, he knows all those things, and to have that third year with your quarterback and center is, to have that connection, it's like having that ace pitcher and that stud catcher behind the plate, right? So I think having those 2 guys is incredibly important. It's hard not to make a Doug Kramer comparison with those 2, right? Undersized. I know those guys don't like hearing it, but just incredibly consistent, and you just know what you're getting all the time. And there's so much value in all of that.
Yeah, especially at that position and with what Illinois asks of that position. Maybe there's not always nationwide that emphasis on that position, but Bart Miller puts a ton on his centers. And yeah, Gesky, I think his highs were very high last season, Jeremy. And you saw this big, massive guard who could really move people in the run game. There were moments where it's like, oh, that is not the Penn State game in particular. Penn State, Purdue back-to-back. He gave up, I think it was 10 pressures in those 2 games. You can't, that's a lot. You've got to raise the lows a little bit higher. Obviously, guards have lows, and probably when it goes bad, it goes really bad for them. But I thought overall he was fine, right? Especially when he was playing where he needed to, the level he needed to play at. Brandon Henderson, before we move on, just keep him at one position. I know that's been an emphasis for Illinois this training camp. He came in and almost immediately played 5 positions as a true freshman on the offensive line. He's a freaking tight end. which paid out very well for Illinois at Nebraska. But letting him build that continuity with Josh Kreutz, build that continuity with Melvin Priestley, stay in at right guard, understand everything that comes with it. I think there's a lot of value there. We say that, and in the same breath, as we get into injuries later on in this pod, he is also probably your most versatile piece, right? So it's a catch-22 a little bit, but when healthy, let him dial in on that right guard spot and go.
I want this to last, like this podcast. I want it to be like, you could listen to this 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now and still have kind of the same thing. So even if you listen to it after the Western Illinois game, you really want to dive in then. But I do feel like we need to discuss a concern about this position right away. The injuries at this position during training camp, the first 2 weeks, it's kind of alarming, Joey. JC Davis has missed already a week with plantar fasciitis, a foot injury that kind of sticks around and lingers. He's had it before, but it kind of re-aggravated it the first week of training camp. As of today, this is August 12th, he was still sidelined, not participating. His backup, Aiden Knappich, the Idaho transfer, has missed the last week with a knee injury. Now, Brett Bielema made it sound like those guys would be available about 2 weeks before the game, which is this week, right? Friday is 2 weeks from the opener. But both your top left tackle options are out for a week at least during training camp and likely to linger in for a few more days here at the very least. TJ McMillan, your backup center, has missed time. Desmond Schuster, who we'll dive into, has missed time in the first week. Eddie Turk suffered an injury, sounds like during the scrimmage. He did not practice or was sidelined at least today and was in the injury pit. Melvin Priestley missed a couple days. Now he's been back. He's looked phenomenal. And when we have seen Melvin Priestley, I am really high on what he can do in year 2 with Illinois. But Joey, I don't like this many injuries. I don't like the rotating of who's our left tackle today, who's our right tackle here. What would have been great with the continuity is as you said, Brandon Henderson, you're just playing right guard. We know who our right tackles are. We know who our left tackles are. Right now, there's been a lot of flux at those positions. And it's just, I don't know if it's a huge deal because if JC Davis is back later this week or early next week, your group is there, right? Your starters are there. But it's just concerning to me that you're already having that many injuries in camp.
Yeah, it is, because you want those guys out there. JC Davis, it was my understanding early on was it wasn't anything long, kind of more precautionary than not with him. He's played a lot of football. Him and Geske have that. Now, there is, as you mentioned, with Aiden Knappich out, there is some shuffling that has to happen, and you don't love that. I think the ones that I'm really looking at is, man, you would love for them to have more extended reps in camp are your TJ McMillans, your Eddie Turks, your really even Aiden Knappich, right? I mean, those guys, especially Turk, I mean, he missed spring ball after he came over from the defensive line. The little bit we saw of him was pretty, encouraging. And that goes back to high school. We knew he had that kind of potential. You would like for him to get those reps. I don't worry in a vacuum about JC Davis missing a week of training camp, but the domino effect of that is a little disheartening, especially if Knappich wasn't out too. I wouldn't think really twice about it, but because Knappich's out, you've got to do a little bit of reshuffling there. Maybe it is a silver lining. I know Brett Bielema has said that. Him and Barry Lunny have kind of put that idea out there that maybe getting guys some of these reps at different spots or guys who ordinarily wouldn't get a lot of reps, there's a silver lining to it. The silver lining to me is not having to move around and shuffle too much.
Yeah, and just we saw today at practice. Now we haven't seen a full practice where they're scrimmaging and all of that. And we get to see a little bit Wednesday. We'll see how much we get to see with BTN in town. Sounds like we should get full access to practice. We'll maybe know a little bit more there. But they had Desmond Schuster back, which is great. He's a big, powerful guy. Has missed time with medical issues and then an injury last year, had a shoulder they had to clean up. But just massive, 6'5", 335, had been repping at guard. They're repping him at right tackle today next to Brandon Henderson in individual drills. But we had heard he's playing tackle now and that he was impressive in his first practice back. But they were playing him at right tackle, which I like as a potential backup to Melvin Priestley. But Melvin Priestley had shifted over to left tackle and was repping next to Josh Geske. So because of the things you're saying, Melvin Priestley's getting some snaps at left tackle, started 2 years there at that position at Grambling before moving to right tackle at Illinois. But before that, you'd had Nathan Knappich, a left tackle. He's not strong enough yet, right? He's a year away probably from playing. You had Zafir Stewart get some snaps. He probably needs to lose some weight before he's ready to really play at this level. So it's just forced some guys to maybe shuffle and move them around a little bit more. So that's kind of my concern. But I do think Melvin Priestley could be a left tackle for you. And Desmond Schuster, as big as he is, as long as his arms are at 37 inches, which is elite. Like NFL guys don't have that. It's interesting, but like depth already was a concern for me on the offensive line. Like we think Brandon Hanson is ready to be that sixth guy, but your backup center has been out, TJ McMillan. And who's your backup center right now? Is that Brandon Henderson? Does he have to take snaps away from guard to play center? Who's your backup tackle? Maybe it's Aiden Knappich when he returns, if he returns, and then you have Desmond Schuster at right tackle. So maybe this all sorts out by the end of training camp, Joey. It's just not ideal. They've had injuries kind of stop you from really understanding who's the best guy here, and getting that solidified too deep.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you talk about who's the best guy here and here, we're talking about the twos. We know the best in the starting five when healthy, but that was one of our big questions. Who are those younger? Because you did lose depth in the transfer portal. You lost Hunter Whiteneck. You lost Kevin Wigginton. It's another
Zy
Chrysler. Thank you. You lost three guys who are in your 2D. So who steps into those roles? So it's not about the starter. We know the starters. It's just about how do the pieces fit beyond them. And I do think before they started mounting, and it was very early, and we were able to see things, you saw guys like Zafir Stewart. It sounds like Des Schuster has been encouraging since he's been back. Tyler McMillan was someone that we were eager to see, Jeremy. Nathan Knappich. These are reps that they're getting. But again, it's just a lot of shuffling. It's the shuffling that makes you a little bit uncomfortable. And I don't want to be in a position, if I'm Illinois, that I have to shuffle Brandon Henderson. If he is your right guard, I want so many snaps for that kid at right guard. Not at center, not at one of the tackles. I want him to play right guard as much as humanly possible. And I think as the shuffling goes, that you threaten that ideal a little bit.
Yeah, that versatility is really good, especially for a backup, right? But like for a guy who still has to establish himself as a starter, you want him to master that position. So that's what we mean there, because versatility is a good thing. It's a good thing that you can play both sides of tackle if you're Melvin Priestley. It's a good thing that Brandon Henderson could potentially play all these positions. You just want him to be really good at one of them because he still has to prove that, right? So maybe Brandon Hanson can play both left guard and right guard for you. Maybe Desmond Schuster can play right guard and right tackle for you. So you have some versatility there in your top seven. It feels like if you're healthy, this can be a deeper group. It just hasn't been healthy yet. But if we get to week one, Joey, and J.C. Davis is back, Aiden Knappich is back, you're certainly better. I did want to mention Tyler McMillan certainly looks the part. SEMO transfer, big, strong lower half, long arms. The problem is he wasn't here for spring ball, right? You added him in the spring. I think spring ball would have been very important for him if he could have gotten those reps, just to be part of the system, understand how Illinois does things, understand the steps, but also the physicality they want to play with. I just don't know if he's as ready to be that backup tackle as, Melvin Priestley certainly was to be the starting tackle last year, right? So while he was a transfer addition that I thought could make an impact, it doesn't feel like he's number 5 or he's number 3 or 4 on the tackle depth chart right now. It feels like Schuster could be that guy and Zafir Stewart could be ahead of him too.
Yeah, it feels like we're talking or thinking about Zafir Stewart in the way I thought we would be talking and thinking about Tyler McMillan coming into this. There was a point, just you and I sharing text as all this was kind of coming together in the spring, thought, could they move Priestley to guard? Is McMillan a guy who could come in and Priestley his way into that right tackle job and kind of shuffle it that way? I don't have that thought at any point right now. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned him, because I do think we maybe thought a little too big on him when he committed, and there is an adjustment period. Now, had he been here in the spring, I would have been really curious to see how that had gone through, but it's a lot of names. I do think, Jeremy, to your point, if healthy, when healthy, as all that settles, I do like the idea of the depth. I do like that Aiden Knappich is your backup left tackle, and you get 4 games that you can mess with that too, right? And it gives you a little bit of that wiggle room. I do like that TJ McMillan when healthy, if healthy, has been in the system for as long as he has. I like the idea. I love the idea of Eddie Turk, right? I think really, really
Big,
highly of him.
powerful. Yeah. And we
Yeah.
got to see him. We got to see him last week in the Illini drill, which is basically just a run fit drill, offensive line versus defensive line, one-on-one. There's a running back or receiver behind them, and they make a cut or whatever. And he was driving people, right? I just think his athleticism is better as an offensive lineman on the interior, and he's big and powerful, man. Like, he's got some Nick Allegretti, like what he looks like when he's moving some people. I'm not going to say he's going to be that, but Eddie Turk was a really good prospect in state here from Lyons Township, and maybe it's a year away, but I can see it. Like, there's a impact offensive lineman at some point potential there.
Yeah, and you add Brandon Hanson to that mix, a guy who we will get into pushing for a starting job. Zafir Stewart is fascinating. He is truly fascinating. He's enormous. You just gotta he's a guy who needs that college weight program, right? He needs to probably trim some down. But I do like the idea of a lot of these guys. It's just a matter of a lot of them are young, right? And there's just been kind of the ins and outs of practice.
I will mention one thing before we move on. This group looks a hell of a lot different than the 2021 group that Brett Bielema overtook. Remember, they had like Blake Jarosati, Doug Kramer, and there's another undersized guy at guard.
Jack Badovanak.
It was a small group. This is not a small group, right? Like, Josh Groot's a little undersized. TJ McMillan's still 6'3", 300 pounds, right? That's not undersized for a center. This is a much bigger group. Like, it looks like a Brett Bielema offensive line, at least physically moving forward. So he's always trying to get more athletic, always trying to get improve in the offensive line, but it certainly looks the part.
Yeah, and I do, before we move on, I do like, you see the framework of a two deep, like a true two deep. How true is any offensive line two deep? You could realistically argue that, but you can at least envision an actual two deep with this offensive line. And that is not something we've talked a great deal about with Illinois offensive line under Brett Bielema as they've rebuilt that.
Yeah, so I mean, it could be Priestley as the backup left tackle, right? But if I did do,
if you're just go straight up, no shuffling, what it looked like,
I would do left tackle Aiden Knappich, redshirt him, replaces J.C. Davis. That would be the plan. Left guard, I might go Kellen Francis because he's been in the system, a JUCO kid from last year. It's probably him and Eddie Turk battling it out for that one. Maybe Brandon Hanson's the real backup at left guard, but sure. I think those guys would be getting the second team reps. Center would be McMillan. If McMillan's not healthy, it's probably Brandon Henderson.
Or Kellen Francis.
Or Kellen Francis.
A little bit of a wild card, right? Because he's got a little bit of the Henderson plan of here, there, and everywhere to him.
Got some versatility to him. And then right guard, Brandon Hanson for sure. Right tackle, it's probably changed. I mean, Desmond Schuster, after today, what I saw today, heard today, but Zafir Stewart, I think, could do it. But I think they're pretty fascinated by Desmond Schuster. But I do like your backup right tackle options there.
Yeah, but again, like, I don't know that in more than one of Brett Bielema's past years at Illinois, we could have legitimately gone down and done that in a way that you weren't putting people who just very clearly were not ready to be.
Mounus Muller at left tackle was like your second left tackle, and it was clear he was not going to play. This would be the second left tackle.
Correct. So, now, again, inexperience, got to get healthy, got to stay healthy, but there is at least the concept of a true 2D.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to will Brandon Hanson really push Brandon Henderson for the starting job? We've heard about it all offseason, all spring, that this was going to be a competition, Joey. Do you think Hanson has a chance to win this job?
I think he has a chance. I don't think he will. And I think it's probably in spring, I would have said, oh, this is going to be really interesting. But I do think as summer's gone through and fall camp, I haven't really gotten the sense that Brandon Henderson is actually going to not be the right guard. But I do think it speaks, one, that they want to push and unlock more from Brandon Henderson, and two, Brandon Hanson's kind of developing at a good speed here, right? At the Henderson speed that we've seen of that 6 offensive linemen in the past. So I don't
notably did not redshirt last year, played on special teams. We can argue, is it worth, just playing him on special teams? Depends on what the rest of his career looks like, if that really helps him get up to speed. We also are we going to have 5 years here for everybody in college football? So maybe Brett Bielema was thinking that too, but they did that with knowing that Brandon Hanson was going to be an important part of the 2025 offensive line, whether that was as a starter or that was as the sixth guy who, if somebody gets hurt, Brandon Hansen's going to come in and play.
Yeah, kind of similar to Hunter Whiteneck, his freshman year, and Brett Bielema, kind of like you dangle that out there, right? Come in here, get reps on field goal. Again, you could reasonably argue if that's worth it in terms of using a red shirt, not using a red shirt. I understand that. But I do think it tells us that Brandon Hansen's moving along quickly. And the fact that I do think it was real in the spring. I do think there was a chance that he could have taken that job from Brandon Henderson. That's just not the vibe I've gotten throughout fall camp to this point. But, and I do think we have to mention this, Zy Chrysler won the job for the first half of last season, and Brandon Henderson pushed and stayed there and kind of kept in that area and then took that job midway through the season. And if anybody knows this, that like just because you win it out of camp doesn't mean you're starting in the bowl game, it's Brandon Henderson. I think that experience is good for him. I've talked to him about that. But I do think it's a reminder that the depth chart week one can change non-injury related, right? And Brandon Henderson's been on both ends of that.
Yeah, they're a little bit different players. Brandon Henderson's athleticism is different, right? For his size, like that's what you look for. Hansen's maybe not as athletic, but he's a good athlete, but just big and powerful. I mean, you stand behind Brandon Hansen and you could disappear, right? Just such a wide back, just a massive human being. So he's got that power element to him. He's a really physical player. So just hasn't had the reps, just doesn't have a lot of experience at this level, while Brandon Henderson has been part of a rotation for 2 years, started 7 games last year for a really, really good team and some big games. I mean, Michigan, South Carolina, he's playing significant reps there. So it's just got to be consistent with Brandon Henderson, but the ceiling is really high. But both these guys should be huge key starters for you next year because you're losing 4 other starters after this season. So it's important for Hansen to get on the field, Joey, and to show something because they need him to be a starter. They're going to be in the portal next year for sure, but these have got to be 2 guys that they can count on going into next year.
Yeah, they are the front runners of the returners on the offensive line for next season. And yeah, I do think I don't know ideally that they want to have like a 6-man rotation on the offensive line like they'd had in the past. But Brandon Hansen has to stay ready in case that either needs to be the case or you get him opportunities where you can find them. But he's a cornerstone of this offensive line beyond this season. They recruited him as such. Wasn't the most flashy recruiting win, but holding on to him, as we've talked about, is our understanding. That was significant. He shut everything down, but there were programs that were interested in coming in and taking a look at him and trying to get in that recruitment.
Penn State being one of them, I think, and some SEC programs were kind of hanging around him. So, yeah, Illinois got him as kind of this under-the-radar recruit, and he was one of their first commits in that class. I think the first one. And then kind of under the radar, quietly, other schools were reaching out, but he had shut down his recruitment. So they're very, very high on him. I do want to mention the rotation part. They had to rotate for Zy Chrysler. Just he wore down during games. Mm-hmm. I don't think they have to with Henderson. But I do think Brandon Hansen, they're going to want to get some snaps during the season. So maybe it's not 300 in a rotation, but getting him 100 to 200 snaps, I think would be very advantageous, even if everybody else stays healthy.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like the offensive line had pretty good injury luck last season. Like we know that the nature of that position, that's not going to be the case every year. So to have Brandon Hansen ready to roll and with the versatility of Brandon Henderson, and kind of the way you would think there would be some reshuffling, he would be that next one up. I think basically outside of center, right? Any non-center position, somehow Brandon Henderson gets in that 5. I think maybe left tackle because you have the Knappich wiggle room.
I was going to say, can we play this game? If left tackle, J.C. Davis missed time, and Aiden Knappich is healthy, it's probably Aiden Knappich, but you could put Melvin Priestley or Brandon Henderson there, but that would mean Brandon Hansen comes in at right guard and somebody moves to right tackle, right? Left guard gets hurt, I would imagine. Hansen comes in. Whether it's Henderson moving to left guard and Hansen moving to right guard, I don't know. Center, you got to find somebody. It's probably Henderson, though. And then Hansen comes in. So to your point, Joey, like I think most of these, if any of these guys miss time with an injury, it probably would be Hansen coming in outside of maybe left tackle.
Yeah, left tackle. And again, that kind of depends on where TJ McMillan is. But I do think there's most injuries end with Brandon Hansen in the starting 5.
All right, last one on the offensive line. what's the biggest step forward you want to see from the starters? Because if they are healthy, Joey, this group should be really good. This should be a big strength of the team. And I think it has potential like 21, like 22, where you have multiple NFL players. Maybe a majority of these guys are NFL players at some point in their careers. And you can really establish the run. You can protect Luke Altmaier pretty well. But this could be one of the better offensive lines in the Big Ten. What's the step forward you need to see for them to reach that potential?
Yeah, I want them to start fast. I don't want to wait until halfway through the season to see this offensive line really establish its dominance. When you have 5 returning starters, when you're not shuffling positions like we saw with Zy Chrysler in 2023, I want to see them come out of the gates strong. I mean, they go back when you talk to Bart Miller, when you talk to some of the offensive linemen, they were profoundly disappointed with the Central Michigan game. That game, they rushed for 137 yards, which you put up 100 rushing yards, okay, fine. You should do better against a team, a Central Michigan team that ended the season allowing 170 rushing yards a game. That is not enough for what Brett Bielema's teams have been, for what Bart Miller wants out of his offensive line. You've got to come out firing a little bit better. They ended up rushing the ball well the next week later on in the game against Nebraska, 166 rushing yards, but Kansas, you rush for fewer than 80 yards. Central Michigan, you rush for 137 yards. That's not coming out of the gates, establishing your offensive line as kind of the front runners of this offense and being the ones who set the tone.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing for me against Central Michigan is you average, I think, 3.5 to 4 yards per carry in that game. They had allowed like 6 to Central Connecticut State or somebody like that. It was Illinois should have been averaging 6 or 7 yards per rush against a team like that. They really struggled with them moving around up front on that defensive front, and that means their communication wasn't very good. But also it just comes down to physicality and having that identity as well. But you expected some growing pains as those guys kind of worked in together, but there was so much experience, college experience. They figured they would have been better than that against a team like that. Yeah,
there's a lot of experience on the interior, right? There was still interior continuity last season as you worked in 2 talented transfer tackles who needed obviously some time, but on the interior, you brought back Gesky, Chrysler. That is where it's like there was still a lot of that there, and you didn't see that show up early on.
Yeah, so the first 5 games, Illinois last year averaged 132 rushing yards, 3.8 yards per carry. That includes sacks, but sacks were kind of a problem in the first 5 games. Last 8 games, 167 yards, 4.8 yards per carry. That also includes sacks. They had 187 against Michigan. What a performance by them against Mason Graham and that whole crew. And then South Carolina, phenomenal defensive front, right? 183 rushing yards against that team. And they closed both those games, especially South Carolina, incredibly well on the ground. We can mention the Penn State game. I don't want to give them a total pass because that was a disaster, especially late in the game as Penn State knew they were dropping back to pass. Uber talented team, but even against a team like that, Joey, this year, Ohio State, if you have all these guys returning and they think they're NFL guys, you don't want to get demolished like that, right? You understand you're going to lose some battles to a Ohio State defensive line and some of these really good Big Ten defensive lines. You don't want to give up 23 pressures and 7 sacks or whatever it is. So I thought
they gave up 17 pressures to Penn State. 17. I know a lot of those came late. That is
not all of them.
You can't repeat in 2 games real quick. In 2 games, Purdue and Penn State, back-to-back games, 28 pressures. That is, you can't be doing that. Like that is too many pressures. Penn State, freak show talent on the defensive front, right? Abdul Carter is as talented as anybody in that NFL draft. That is a ton. Even though everyone knew you were throwing the ball, I do think in that game early on, that offensive line, outside of the Josh Kreutz snap, held its own, right?
That was the biggest issue probably of the entire game for the offensive
line. That's right. And then when it became a throw fest, when Illinois had to drop back to throw, Penn State's going to do that to any team. That Penn State team is going to do that to any team that drops back to throw. But 17 pressures is an enormous amount.
But along those lines, I love this Bart Miller quote I got from last week. He said that experience level has come a long way. The growth has come a long way. That's the expectation. It's not just 6 wins and covering guys up. It's let's dominate. You want to go to the NFL, you got to dominate. What a line. And I just think for me, that's got to start from the start of the season. Like if you guys, if JC Davis is a high draft pick, if Melvin Priestley can live up to a potential that I think is very high. Like I think this guy could be in the discussion for top 100 draft pick, probably at a guard, but I think he has a really high ceiling. If Josh Kreutz and Josh Geske want to be in the NFL and get an invite to the combine, do it from the start. Do it from the start, and then you can put yourself in the Joe Moore Award conversation. You protect Luke Altmaier. You get that run game going with Aiden Lawfrey and Caden Fagan, and this could be a really, really special season. But if you struggle early on in the offensive line, the Duke game ain't going to be easy. You're going to be favored in that game. It ain't going to be easy. And then Indiana, that's another really, really good team. So they can't afford another slow start there. I mean, they got away with it last year, but this year it's got to be better.
Yeah, some of those early games that they struggled last year, Central Michigan in particular, stunting on that defensive line, that they clearly saw something that Illinois was struggling to handle and had success. Manny Diaz and Duke, if they see that window, they're going to do that. And that's going to really stress this offensive line. So you just got to come out. I'm going to get to this real quickly, Jeremy. They have 87 starts on this offensive line simply at Illinois in their career, 126 Division I starts. Play like that. Play like you have 87 starts at Illinois, 126 over Division I experience. And a lot of those starts at Illinois for those guys have come mostly at the same positions, right? So come out and assert yourself.
The other thing I would mention, like, I think it's on Bart Miller too, the offensive line coach, to get them ready. And he talked about it. Like, I have to prepare them for what they're going to see, that movement up front. Like, all of those things. It's important to get off to a better start than they've had the last 2 years, because 2 years ago, it certainly was a disaster, even bigger than last year. So getting off to a strong start, I agree. That's what you want to see moving forward.
And I think Josh Kreutz is going to find his role in that too. His voice is the prominent voice in that offensive line room, and within the offense, really, it's a prominent voice. I think he's going to just kind of covering him like you and I have over the last 4 or 5 years. You kind of know how he's going to approach that as a center and as a team captain. So I think he's going to put some of that on his own shoulders as well.
Any final thoughts on the offensive line?
I got nothing more. We've talked for 42 minutes on him.
Not enough for me.
You got a deep cut you want to throw out there?
Oh,
that's Schuster. Let's real quick. He's
fascinating.
He is, and I think early on in training camp, while he was out, it was kind of hard to maybe understand where he fit in all of this, because he simply had so many nagging health issues while at Illinois. Seeing him at tackle today was kind of okay. Is this a shuffling move because your tackles have kind of been through it a little bit injury-wise, or is this somewhere that you really think you could see him with reps? Because we'd always envisioned him, Jeremy, as a guard.
Yeah, it's what he was recruited for originally. They've had some success with JUCO guys in the offensive line, right? I mean, they nailed it with Isaiah Adams, and even though Zy Chrysler lost his starting job, that's a great get. Like, he was not a highly touted guy, and they get him. He's 2.5-year starter for Illinois and some good teams there. He looks the part. It's just we haven't seen him enough, Joey. He hasn't been able to practice. He had his medical issue, a heart condition. His first year, got that all sorted out, and returns for spring ball, or returns for last season, but then has a shoulder injury. He's got to get cleared up, so he missed most of spring ball, right? And then this year he gets into camp, and we see him in a green jersey almost immediately. So it was kind of like, man, are we ever going to see him on the field? So to see him today was great. And, whenever I've seen him take snaps, he's big, he's physical. Bart Miller always talks like he can move people off the line of scrimmage one-on-one, and that certainly looks to be the case. He's just got to stay on the field. That has been his biggest issue. But you talk about a fifth-year player who could have multiple years of eligibility left with a medical red shirt. That's a really intriguing guy, right? He's a really intriguing guy that could add the depth they kind of need. So you and I were talking about, we want to do a stock risers piece of training camp. We're kind of struggling because we kind of know who all these guys are. Well, Desmond Schuster would be a stock riser for me as long as he can stay on the field.
Yeah, we get a little bit more practice access tomorrow. I think that'll tell us a little bit more about some of those depth guys, Schuster included, but the positional versatility on the offensive line, I understand we talked about how with Henderson, you'd like to maybe get away from that a little bit, let him focus. But I do think when you're in that backup group, in that 2 deep, it's awesome to have that, right? Like you have such a high value if you can do that effectively.
The other deep cuts I would give, Zafir Stewart's really intriguing to me. The ability to play both tackles needs to trim up continually, but he's got the talent. He's got the length, the strength, the power, the athleticism, the feet to be good down the road. The other guy who's really the most intriguing freshman to me might be Dylan Frechette, Big Island, out of Rhode Island, played down in Florida. Looks the part, man. Like I'm not going to sit here and say I've seen a lot of him, but 6'6", 300 pounds, moves really well. He was in the injury pit today, but really intriguing kid for the long term. He's not going to play a role here, maybe even next year, but just long term, he looks like a guy, right? Like just how you want them to look on the offensive line. Dylan Frechette intrigues me for the long term.
Yeah, he intrigues me too. Brett Bielema typically has found a freshman offensive or defensive lineman to throw on field goal or throw on PATs. Dylan Frechette's got the size that you would say, could it be him? If there were one, he would be probably my front runner for that, but I don't know if that's going to be the plan for him.
I don't think you need to.
I don't think you need to, but you know how it's gone, right? You look up, it's like, oh, Hunter Whiteneck's playing there, Brandon Henderson or wherever, and there's a role there. I don't know if that'll be the case again this year, but he would be probably my leader for that among the freshmen.
All right, we stretch that to like 40 straight minutes of offensive line. I'm proud of us, Joey.
Feel good about getting some of those deep cuts out there?
I do.
Yeah, I'm glad.
All right, let's get into the defensive line. For the second straight year, Joey, they are just mass overhaul of this group. T-Rod Edwards was a big success last year. The nose tackle streak continues for Terrence Jamison, getting guys to the NFL, but went from a rotation player to a really good Big Ten starter. All Big Ten honorable mention. I thought he deserved that so well. And then Dennis Briggs was a big hit in the transfer portal. Our question about him was, can he stay healthy for an entire year in his 7th year of college? He did, and he was disruptive. Really good pass rusher, disrupted the backfield. Maybe not as strong against the run, but good player, got into an NFL training camp. So that was a huge success, but not a very deep group last year. And that really hurt them defending the run. Gave up 4.4 yards per carry. That was the most Brett Bielema team has given up. They were disruptive as pass rushers. 82 pressures was up from the previous year, which included Johnny Newton on that team. So that was good to see because T-Rod and Dennis Briggs were pretty disruptive. And I thought Ezekiel Holmes played well late in the year as a 7th-year guy, finally kind of emerging. But it was a young second group with Jeremiah Warren, Alex Bray, and Pat Farrell, all just basically teenagers. I think one of them was 20 years old, but second year in a college program, it's hard to hold up against some of those Big Ten offensive lines. So it was kind of a mixed bag last year for the defensive line. Thought they were pretty good against the pass, not as good consistently against the run game, but a solid group. But all your starters are gone. 4 of your top players from that rotation are gone. So you went heavy in the transfer portal, Joey, and added, 5 defensive linemen to this group. So you'd like to have some long-term stability in that room, some more turnover in that room, but they went to the portal and certainly attacked it.
Yeah, they did. And, we'll get to some of those transfers in a second, but they've got it. Those transfers have got to clean up the run defense. That was not good enough last season. They allowed 149 rush yards a game, 4.4 yards a carry, kind of traded pressures for traded run defense to get those 82 pressures. I thought T-Rod Edwards was awesome as a pressure generator from that nose tackle position, which you hadn't really – something we should probably talk to Terrence Jamison about is how do you value pressure versus run stopping at that nose tackle position. But you brought in the transfers to shore up to one, you need experienced bodies, right? Given how much you lost, but they've got to shore up this rush defense, because I think if you do that, I like what the secondary has. I like some of those pieces. You're a little bit older, right? We knew going into last season that your Pat Farrells, that your Alex Brays, that your Jeremiah Warrens were young. And that is being a young defensive lineman in the Big Ten, unless you're the freakiest of freak guys, right? The rare 4% of young defensive linemen, that is a really, really tough spot to be put in. And that showed, especially when you would give those starters a break and you'd bring in some of those younger guys. They just got moved pretty easily.
Corey Parker and Aaron Henry have a heck of a development history, but I don't know if there's a position coach that you trust more than Terrence Jamison.
Agreed.
just the way he's able to get out of guys, like just development wise. And I feel like the talent level is increasing on the defensive line. But it's weird because you feel that way, but this is the biggest question mark of the defense going into this year is the defensive line, because there's so much change and so little continuity with Alex Bray transferring to Kansas, along with Dennis Briggs, T-Rod Edwards, and Ezekiel Holmes out. So let's break these down a little bit, Joey, by the positions on the defensive front. For those who don't know, Illinois runs 3 down defensive linemen, 2 4-eye techniques that line up on the inside of the tackles, and then a nose tackle that lines up over the center. Now, they can change. They can be a 4-man front sometimes and have a 3 technique and a nose and 2 outside linebackers, but those outside linebackers play a little bit more like traditional defensive ends in this scheme, sometimes can back out. So I just wanted to whiteboard that before we get into this conversation. Let's start at nose tackle. It's been a heck of a run for Terrence Jamison. Every year his starter has gone on to sign an NFL undrafted free agent contract. Roderick Perry was the first one that he inherited. Then Calvin Avery, emerged and finally, lived up to the potential that we thought he had as a prep prospect. And then Denzel Jackson, one of the better finds in the transfer portal in the Brett Bielema era. And then T-Rod Edwards last year, another really good transfer ad, but he took his game to another level last year, now in the Chargers roster, fighting for a roster spot there. So big shoes to fill because T-Rod was really, really good. They add Kurt Neal from Wisconsin. They return Jeremiah Warren, who was a rotation player last year at nose tackle. And Angelo McCollum played a little bit last year. General Hunt played a little bit last year, but preserved a red shirt. So 4 options there, Joey. Who do you think will win the competition to start at nose tackle?
I think it'll be Kurt Neal. He's got Big Ten experience. He not a long guy. He looks like he's powerful, right? He understands all the nuances that go into being a Big Ten nose tackle. He came to Illinois to fit in a system that probably gave him the best opportunity to be the most productive version of himself. I think it was fun. It's been fun to talk about guys like Jeremiah Warren, like Angelo McCollum, guys who I believe will be in the rotation and will play a good number of snaps. But I think if you're looking at the starter, that answer to me is Kurt Neal. I know you want to talk about Angelo McCollum, so I will turn it over to you. But early on, I'm going to lean into the experience. I'm going to lean into a guy who's been around a little bit. And then maybe over time, McCollum makes that push and cuts into that snap. But I think early on, it'll be Neal.
I agree with you. It is Kurt Neal. He's already shown himself to be a Big Ten impact player. Now, he wasn't great at Wisconsin, right? Like, he was a top 500 prospect in the composite. So there's some pedigree there. He had a lot of SEC offers. So, but like, and we see in camp, like, he's undersized. He looks like T-Rod Edwards in pads, right? He's 6 foot, 300 pounds, squatty guy, but really strong. It does have some really good quickness off the line of scrimmage, just not as long as you'd really like. A Denzel Jackson was incredibly long and just ate up space, right? He's not that type of player, but he can be disruptive, can really hold his spot and anchor down and let everybody else kind of make plays. But he needs to improve, right? And that's where the alignment with Terrence Jamison is really interesting, because I'm sure he saw T-Rod Edwards, who is not a big-time prospect, and said, man, he's not in the NFL because of what he did at Illinois. And, James Thompson and Kurt Neal talk about what they saw watching Illinois and competing against them on the other sideline, and they really liked what they did up front. So that's a new project. Like, if there's going to be somebody who's that next guy, I think it would be Kurt Neal. He's going to play a huge role in this rotation. I do think he will start. I don't think we should overlook Jeremiah Warren. He missed the spring, which I think hurts him a little bit, but he does have the length and size. Like, he is the biggest nose tackle option they have. He's 6'3", 300 pounds, has a lot of experience. So while another guy I'm really excited about, I don't think we should overlook Jeremiah Warren and being a part of this rotation. Part of why I'm looking forward to tomorrow's practice is kind of see, what is this rotation looking like? How are they rotating these guys in with the first and second team? Because I do think Warren's going to play a role there. But I am excited about Angelo McCollum. He's my kind of guy. I don't want to say he's Johnny Newton-like, but his disruption, like, he just gets in the backfield and he's just a football player who knows how to do what he's supposed to do at his position. But he's really quick. He's adding some strength. The strength part is what I'm a little nervous about. But, man, he seems like he's always in the backfield whenever we do have access to practice. Every one-on-one rep I've seen, it feels like he wins. Now, some of those might be on like a walk-on center. Some of them are on starters. but like he just keeps flashing every time I see him. And when Terrence Jameson told me in the spring he wants McCollum fighting for the starting spot, I took note of that, and we keep hearing good things about him. So I think Kurt Neal is likely to win. I'm not counting on Jeremiah Warren to just take another step and be the next, the number 2 guy in this rotation. But Andrew McCollum gives him something there, maybe like a better version of what General Hunt gave him. So even if it's a sub package, I think Andrew McCollum adds a lot of pass rush value, and General Hunt added some pass rush value, but I think he's clearly more of a sub package guy because he's like 5'10".
Yeah, Jeremiah Warren is like under consideration for sign guy for me. I'm just really interested by him and by his versatility, and maybe a bigger role for him is in that 4-eye guy who can play all 3 spots. I'm really intrigued by him. I think McCollum is probably a sign guy consideration for you going into that pod when
got my Sharpie getting ready.
Yeah, but it's McCollum's the guy who I think can generate T-Rod like pressure from that spot. But then again, it's how do you hold up against the run, right? And maybe Warren is more your run guy who could generate. I don't want to act like he's not someone who can generate pressure, but he does have a little bit more size to him. Yeah, those are the 3 main players. General Hunt probably is that rotation guy, but those are the 3 guys to be talking about and thinking about. I will say real quickly, who did we talk? I think it was James Thompson mentioned Carter Hewitt had been repping a little bit at nose. That is interesting.
Which would be really interesting. That would be really interesting to have a guy of that size. They also talked about Pat Farrell getting a little bit more on the interior. So again, we don't get to see a lot. So maybe they do deploy something different. I still think Carter is going to be one of those 4-eye guys. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a guy who could potentially be a long nose tackle, like a 6'5" get extension guy, that certainly could be a guy like Carter Hewitt. So be worth watching in practice tomorrow.
If he were a guy who had been here for more than just the summer, and like he had multiple years at Illinois where he could really pack on that weight. He's not a small guy by any means. Probably would like some more weight on him if you were playing him at the nose more regularly. I could have seen him at some point in his career, had he been at Illinois for multiple years, develop into that nose, but maybe that's just a different look they're throwing. I just wanted to make mention of that we had heard. And James Thompson said that he had been repping a little bit at nose.
That's a good point. All right, let's go to the other position. Will the transfers provide upgrades at the 4-eye technique? That's a big one because Dennis Briggs obviously was very, very good last year. Alex Bray, I just felt like he was a year away, and it really felt like he was out of position. That's why he transferred to Kansas. He's going to play more of that role that Austin Booker did when he was at Kansas, a true defensive end. I think that's how he's built. He got run over a little bit last year, didn't have a ton of pressure. So I know they were really high on what he could do. It just didn't feel like it was ultimately a fit there. I did think Ezekiel Holmes stepped up and played well last year, but do you think they got upgrades at those positions, Joey?
Is anyone going to be a clear upgrade over Dennis Briggs? I don't know. On the whole, at those 2 positions, can you upgrade? Yes, because I think Alex Bray was a year away and out of position. I think James Thompson, we have pretty much no questions about, right? Like, if you can still find
health.
Yeah, like if you can still find real estate on Thompson Island, I would buy that because I don't know how much is left at this point. He's really athletic. He flirted with the 20-mile-an-hour club at his size, which we've talked about since he arrived on campus and we saw him. He's massive.
Just to whiteboard this, 2-year starter at Wisconsin, 30-something pressures over those 2 years, one of their better defensive linemen over those 2 years, 6'6", 300 pounds. Keith Randolph was a really good 4-eye, right? But he was like 6'3". The length that this group is bringing, we'll get into Carter Hewitt, who's 6'5", 300, Tommy Wadurajai, 6'5", 300 pounds. They're just starting to look more like the NFL 5 techniques, NFL 4-eye techniques. Illinois has kind of been undersized at those a little bit the last couple of years. So Thompson, I go into the season thinking he's going to be their top defensive lineman, and probably one of their top 5 defensive players.
At least 2 are in the secondary right now, right? If you think of the top 5.
Bailey, Scott, Akis, Rosiak, Thompson.
Yeah. I had to go through it all in my brain. Yeah, I could see that. That's fine. I mean, that no questions. Pencil him in. I think he's going to be productive. Can some combination of Tommy Wadurajai, Carter Hewitt, Pat Farrell give you more than what Alex Bray and Ezekiel Holmes gave you a year ago. And I mean, the bar is really, can you be better than second year Alex Bray, who was, again, a year away, probably out of position? I think you look at the experience Durjai has and the talent that he has. Carter Hewitt has been around college football for a while. He was at UNI in Northern Iowa, so that's a jump forward. But physically, the development, I think, is notable there, and getting a little older at those spots. So is anyone going to be just straight up an upgrade over Dennis Briggs? I don't know. I think Thompson could be in that conversation, but I think on the whole, those two positions, you could have an upgrade just given the experience and given the options you have. Because it didn't feel like Illinois had a ton of experienced options a year ago, right?
No, I mean, Briggs and Thompson have the same questions coming in. Thompson's a sixth-year player, missed most of last year with a pec injury. He's been healthy throughout everything here, so he's been good. That's my only health question with him. But if he stays healthy, I think they do upgrade. Because even if he only matches what Briggs did, Briggs could be better as a pass rusher, but Thompson's really disruptive. And I think Thompson could be better in the run game than Briggs. The other part of this is I just thought Alex Bray was not ready yet, and again, out of position. I think Durajaye, this is all bus team for Illinois. Tomiwa, for people that see him wearing number 36 this year on the defensive line, 6'5", 300 pounds, was a really good rotation player at West Virginia 2 years ago, but didn't play barely at all at Florida State last year, who had one of the best transfer classes. Obviously a disaster of a season for them, but he didn't play on that team. So there are question marks about how that talent translates, and that's on Jamison to get the most out of him. But boy, there's a lot of talent there, Joey, because he's big, he's strong, he's athletic. He's on his fourth school in 4 years. So I would hope that the clock starts ticking and all of a sudden you're on your fourth school and be like, man, I better turn this all into something. So you hope that urgency is there with him. While Carter Hewitt's kind of the opposite, right? Like, don't know if he's the greatest athlete, but he's big, he's strong, 6'5", 290 pounds, coming from Northern Iowa with a chip on his shoulder the entire time. And what a Brett Bielema guy, right? You expect him to be tough, smart, dependable. I think he could be like a Ezekiel Holmes type player. Maybe he can be better than that. They sound pretty high on him. But I do think Tomiwa is the upside there. But I think at least Carter Hewitt, if he's your other starting 4-eye, and I expect it to be Tomiwa, at least I think you'd be stronger against the run than you were with Alex Bray at that 4-eye spot.
That is exactly what I wanted to ask you, because it feels like this defensive line is trading some of those 82 pressure, 6.3 a game last year, for a better output against the run, right? Like if you told me this defensive line was going to be in the 72 to 78 range for pressure, 72 to 75 range, but you trim off a little bit on that yards per carry and that rush yards per game, that feels like how this defensive line was constructed. At least, like, I don't think of James Thompson, he's disruptive. He's not Johnny Newton disruptive, right? Very few are. But I think this defensive line is built to hold up better against the run, which was a very glaring issue last year.
Yeah, I do think Thompson can be disruptive. And you need somebody, and we'll get to this when we get into the outside linebacker preview. Gabe Axe is going to get a lot of attention. Somebody has to take advantage of that with the one-on-ones. I think Thompson could be one of those guys. Maybe your nose tackle can be one of those guys who provides that pressure. Maybe it's Tomiwa. They need to take advantage of that against the pass. But, yes, they have to be stronger on first and second down. Right? We talk about that third down percentage being bad last year. Part of that is because you didn't stop the run well enough on first and second down. So you're going up against 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2 instead of 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 6. And it's just so much harder to defend that. So I think that's what they needed. They needed more size, they needed more strength, and they needed more experience. And they certainly went and did that in the transfer portal. So I would expect James Thompson to be really good. The key here, I think, is Tomiwa Durajaye. He's a huge X factor on this defense.
Yeah, and we'll get into the depth. I know that's our next topic, but if Tomiwa Durajaye can be that serviceable to good Big Ten starter, when you pair him with James Thompson, with Gabe Ackes, with whatever combination they use at nose and the other outside linebacker spot, then I feel a lot better about that defensive front. And this is a good transition into some depth, Jeremy.
Yeah, I just wanted to look up Durajaye's stats real quick from last year, because when he was at West Virginia, man, like he was disruptive. He had a couple sacks in like a rotational role. So I'm not finding that right off the top of my head. So it's not that important. But he had like 2.5, 3 sacks that year, and a dozen pressures that year in a rotational role. If he can have 3 to 4 or 5 sacks, or at least a lot of pressure from that position and be pretty good against the run, that'd be a huge boost to the defensive line, because that was certainly that position. If you're trading Thompson for Briggs, that other 4-eye technique was a weakness for Illinois last year.
Yeah, I have it. At West Virginia in 2023, he had 23 tackles, 3.5 sacks with a 65.3 PFF grade and 270 snaps. Remember, he began his career at Kentucky.
Yeah.
And I would encourage, we talked to him in the spring and probably kind of sends people down a rabbit hole, but he was really open about his path to Illinois in the spring and how much he kind of
that raises red flags, right? When you're in four schools in 4 years, it sometimes raises red flags, but he seems pretty mature and seems like he's learned from his experiences. That's for sure.
Yeah, he told me, I think now is being where my feet are. I think something I struggled with in the past. It's been easy so far. I'm not thinking I have to go pro this year. We've got to win this year. Learning our motto here, learning how to be tough, smart, and dependable. That's been the biggest thing for me. Been coming in, I've been getting extra work. He's a guy who kind of knows that needs to just settle in with where he's at right now and the talent.
He always seemed to be chasing the next thing somewhere else, right? So he goes from Kentucky to West Virginia, goes really well at West Virginia, decides to transfer up to Florida State, doesn't play. And that's got to open your eyes. And it's like, oh, nothing's handed to me. I need to find a place where I can develop the best and set myself up and maybe just be there, right? Whether it's a year or two, and figure that out. So that's learned life experience right there from Tomiwa. So that's kind of, maturity you hope to bring in your program. All right, last one on the D-line, Joey. This might be the most important question. How much is depth improved? Because the depth was the biggest issue, I thought, up front. The starters were in, thought it was solid, right? You could win with those guys. When 19 and 20-year-olds came in, it was a struggle to hold up against some of these Big Ten teams. It looks a little different now when Jeremiah Warren's in year 3. Pat Farrell is in year 3. He's going to be a part of this rotation. Should mention him at the 4-eye spot. Maybe he's got some versatility to go on the interior a little bit. Angelo McCollum in year 2. And then you had guys like Carter Hewitt. And I don't want to leave out Eli Conan from Bemidji State, 6'7", 275 pounds. Looks like all the guys Brett Bielema recruited at Wisconsin back in the day, but you hope depth is improved. How much do you think it is?
Another name I want to throw out there, Demetrius John. Kind of heard his name thrown around a little bit. Don't really know where to set expectations, but I do want to mention we've heard his name thrown around. I think depth has improved because it's older, right? I'm a believer in the trenches. Sure, there's guys like Carter Hewitt, Tomiwa Durajai, Eli Conan. They have to prove it, right? But Conan's not as old as the other guys, but I do like that they are older, that they have been in a strength program. They have experience of seeing different looks on the offensive line, of just being in different spots. I like that. What does that translate to? I don't know, but I do think you have more of a rotation that you can go to and not feel like you're having a massive drop off, at least from the age department. Jeremiah Warren's been around, man. He's played snaps in college football. Pat Farrell's played snaps in college football. We've talked about Hunt. Carter Hewitt's played a ton of snaps in college football. So I think there's some depth there on paper. It reminds me a little bit of the offensive line in some capacity. You've got a couple experienced pieces that you can bring in, but you're also hoping that in a system that prides itself on being a developmental system, that Jeremiah Warren, that Pat Farrell, that Angelo McCollum, maybe Demetrius John are ready to show kind of the fruits of being in that developmental system for at least a year or two.
Yeah, how I would do this, I don't know if the defensive line starters has taken a big leap forward, right? It might tread water this year compared to what it was last year. I think that highly of T-Rod Edwards, and I thought Dennis Briggs was really good too. So maybe you're even there by getting Thompson, Neal. Maybe he's not as good as Edwards this year. Maybe Durajai is a slight upgrade or a decent upgrade. But maybe at the end, it all evens out. But I think where this group can improve the most is that second unit, because I thought the second unit was just outmatched last year. So if you can have a serviceable second unit that can come in, give you solid reps, and just help you get James Thompson off the field for a series or two, because the last, really, most of the Brett Bielema era, they haven't been able to go to their second unit very much. Like your starting defensive linemen are playing 600, 800 snaps. You look at some of these other schools like Michigan, they might be playing 400 or 500 because they have all these guys that can just rotate into the game and it's one after another. I don't know if Illinois is quite there yet with defensive line depth where you have all these dudes you can just keep rotating like the Philadelphia Eagles do, Joey. But I do feel like you can put Jeremiah Warren in for a couple series and feel good about it and feel solid about it. I think you can put in Angelo McCollum and think that he's going to be disruptive. Carter Hewitt's a huge addition for those reasons as well. And, Pat Farrell is a name that it seems like Jameson is excited about, can take a step. Started a game last year, wasn't ready for it, but he started a game last year, got some snaps, and now you add another 10, 15 pounds of strength and just all that experience to him. Yeah, I just think naturally, not just adding Hewitt and Durajaye and Thompson, Neal, but also all those guys just getting a year older is massive for this group.
Yeah, it's huge. And that's when you're recruiting guys who maybe aren't the highest recruited guys, you do need to allow them time to develop. I think if you look back at next year now, I mean, you can say like that was a tall order to put Pat Farrell, to put Alex Bray in those positions last year. I don't want to say it stunted anything, but you didn't set them up for the most success that they're going to have in college. But that's where you were, right? And it was a good opportunity to get that experience. I'm a huge believer in age and weight systems in the defensive line, and you can maybe overcome a little bit, especially when you're talking about those guys being your depth guys.
Yeah, and the other part of this is you're just a huge believer in Terrence Jameson. So the more time with him, right, the better I think you're going to be. So the fact that those guys have another year of development under him is huge. Any deep cuts you want on the defensive line, Joe? Your favorite freshman, I know.
There are two guys I do want to bring up just because they look impressive as freshmen. Cam Brooks, he put on good weight at Homeward Flossmoor, right? Homeward Flossmoor, am I right on that? I am, yeah. He put on good weight, and I think he showed up. It's like, whoa, you are not the kid that they started recruiting way back when. There's a lot.
Who was an edge rusher at the beginning when Illinois was recruiting him, but they eval and said this kid's going to add strength pretty easily, and he did. He got up to like 280, 290 last year, and now he's what, 300?
Yeah, he looks good. He looks good. And Isaiah White, man, he was very productive in high school, incredibly productive. Also, I think physically looks pretty good, right?
That's what a nose tackle looks like. That's that wide bottom nose tackle with it just huge. He looks like a man, right? Like 6'2", 320, but there's not a lot of bad weight on Isaiah White. So I really like him as a prospect. It's going to be a longer term guy, right? Maybe it's a couple years before he makes a big impact, but he reminds me of what Denzel Jackson looked like.
Yeah, there's quietly a little bit of a path here, right, for nose tackles where you don't have to go and find the Denzel Jacksons, the T.Y. Edwards, the Kurt Neal. You're starting to see a little bit of talent start to stack up there in a pipeline coming. I don't know how much those two are going to play. I don't want to pretend like I think they're going to have huge spots in the rotation. I know people like hearing about freshmen, and I think those two came in physically as very impressive guys. So I just kind of keep them on the radar a little bit and what that looks like moving forward. Do you have any thoughts on Demetrius John, Jeremy? I like
to dive into that.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, I loved him as a prospect. He reminded me of Keith Randolph a lot. 6'3", 270, still thin for his position. But part of that is because he had to move to outside linebacker last year just to give him practice bodies at the position because they had a lot of injuries. Mason Moraga was out. So they needed somebody there. And he really wasn't ready to contribute on the defensive line. And a lot of what they do, outside linebacker, pass rush, handwork, all that, extension, translates to the defensive line. But he's gotten stronger. You could tell that. I still think he's a year away strength-wise, but he's got some disruptiveness to him. He's a good athlete. He's got length. So I think he's probably still a year away from where I want. To me, it feels like where Alex Bray was last year. And Illinois was counting on him to start and be in the rotation. Like the fact that you can maybe wait for John another year, maybe get him on the field a little bit this year. But I do like his potential long-term. And the fact that the coaches are mentioning him, like Aaron Henry and Terrence Jameson is a positive. So don't want to overlook him as a depth piece, but I think a year from now, he might be ready for impact.
Yeah, and I also think you think about his value as a disruptor. He moved ever so briefly last season to outside linebacker, which shows you he can at least move, right? He's able to go out there and give wasn't in games, but able to give good looks in practice as someone who can functionally move around. I think when you translate that to the defensive line long term, that you like that skill set there as a guy who could be disruptive at that spot. So don't know that we'll see him a lot this year, Jeremy, but is a guy to have on your radar. And I do, before we get out of this, I do want to say we talked about Cam Brooks, Isaiah White, Demetrius John, Angelo McCollum, Jeremiah, some younger guys. We really like the class of 2026 defensive linemen. Tony Belonga and I, stock up, right? I am very eager to see what he looks like. You are seeing Terrence Jameson's recruiting and hitting the ground running, winning some good recruiting battles. You're seeing that start to come to light. You might not see that on the field this year, but just the idea of them in the system, the talent they bring. I do think long-term this position's set up pretty well.
I will say, last note, the reason we shouldn't overlook Jeremiah Warren, reason number one, single-digit guy on the roster. When you get those single digits, now there's a couple guys like Mario Sanders, Ashton Hollins, Sabor Kareem, Daniel Brown. Doesn't mean automatically you're going to be a big-time player, but usually you don't get single digits unless the staff thinks you're going to make some kind of impact or you've earned it.
At least on the defensive line, right? Like the defensive line is one where if they're in single digits, like, how did you end up here? Let's look into this a little bit more. We go into Wednesday's open to us practice. I don't know what we're going to see, right? To me, I'm going in mentally bracing that this is going to be answering some depth chart questions that you and I have. And if we see anything more, great. But there was a practice last year that we got into. It's like, oh, you're just not going to throw. Like, you're not going to throw. There's not going to be anyone. This is going to be very much like get in tackling. The pit, kind of a glorified walkthrough in a lot of ways. So I'm going in expecting that and I'm ready to be pleasantly surprised. But if you see that, then you do get some depth chart questions answered. And Warren in particular, the versatility stands out to me. I'm really eager to see where he fits into all of this. And hopefully we get a little bit more of a clear picture, because I do think once you start getting beyond those guys that we think your transfer starters, right? Thompson, Neal, Durjai, I want to see how that all lays out, and hopefully tomorrow answers some of those questions.
You know, some people talk about the quarterbacks and running backs for the longest time. No, right here at Illini Inquirer, we talk about the offensive line and defensive line. One is the most guys, right, outside of defensive back. Secondary is a massive group because they play 5 of them at a time. But offensive line, defensive line are two of the biggest groups on the team and two of the most important groups on the team.
I feel like we have to put like an asterisk next to that. Like, if there's a returning quarterback, we will not spend as much time as we will on the offensive line. If it's a new face at quarterback, pencil in about an hour and a half to hang out with us. No,
still offensive line, defensive line. It's my brand.
Are you already excited about next year's offensive line preview podcast?
Oh my gosh.
Transfers, some new faces, some guys who have been in the system. That is like the Werner Christmas, man. I feel like you need to wear like a tie next year to really just really sink your teeth into that.
I was just thinking, we really haven't covered a wide open quarterback competition in quite a while, right? So next year,
it was Brandon Peters' first year, was it not?
It was obviously going to be Peters, right? It was Peters and Isaiah Williams and Matt Robinson and
for one more.
I think it was MJ Rivers still here at that time.
Oh gosh,
I don't even know if he was here. But 2018, we knew it was AJ Bush. 2019, we knew it was Peters. Then Peters.
Matt Robinson was so fun that first week in 2018.
Yeah, phenomenal.
That was awesome.
Phenomenal. But then, 2021, they brought in Sikowski, but you knew it was going to be Peters for the most part. 22 was clearly DeVito. 23 was clearly Altmaier, even though they brought in Paddock. In the last couple of years, it's obviously been Altmaier. So 2017, it was like Chase Crouch, but he was clearly the guy. I mean, next year could be like
Chase Crouch have a brief run at tight end.
Yes, the next
year. Because I was in Decatur. I remember Tupper coming back and writing like he's tight end. I thought, oh, they don't have a quarterback.
Yeah. Not saying that there were great quarterbacks, but there certainly weren't a lot of real competitions. Next year feels like it'd be the major competition. But the point was, Joey, the offensive line competition, you're going to have to keep me from making that the major story. Because it's going to be wide open in the offensive line next year.
Are you going to talk about, like we're talking about the defensive line in a lot of, because I think you'll have a Thompson-like presence on the Brandon Henderson on the offensive line next year. Yeah, that is going to be, but I do think like I can also go the other way, right? Like You keep the red shirt on Knappich. You know your left tackle. Huge value in that, right? To have a second year in the system, left tackle. I think you know your guard is going to be Henderson, right? And Hansen.
Who's your center? Be interesting. Is it Henderson?
Center? Is it
it
Henderson?
McMillan?
Is it TJ McMillan? Right tackle? I think is that Zafir Stewart transfer to be determined.
Schuster? Does Schuster get another year?
Eddie Turk. I buy it in. I do think there's some comfort in knowing the left tackle. If all goes well, the comfort in knowing the 2026 left tackle, and there's actually guys who like belong in competitions, right? I think that is a big takeaway we'll have is these guys belong in these offensive line competitions. You're not just hoping someone can take a spot.
Got a lot more position battles next year. I mean, think of the secondary, all the guys you're replacing there, linebacker, replacing the guy there, defensive line, replacing James Thompson after this year, outside linebacker, replacing everybody. A lot more position battles next year.
The biggest winter, like immediately when we go to cover whatever the postseason looks like for Illinois, is so Matt Bailey, what is it that you're doing next, right? Like that is the biggest December, early January, I think, conversation about Illinois is what is Matt Bailey's plan? Obviously, do they go get a transfer quarterback? What's that look like? But Bailey is in the top 2 of conversations for this December.
It's going to be, you hope to return some really good running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, defensive line. You hope to have some continuity from the rotation guys kind of coming back. Tommy Watt and Kurt Neal could come back, but it's going to be a busy transfer portal season for Illinois because they got a lot of starters you're going to replace, which is why you got to take advantage of this year. But yeah, we're going on an hour 20, so I think it's time to wrap it up. I think even the offensive line and defensive line people are ready for this one to wrap up. But we appreciate you guys listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. We do have access to a full practice likely tomorrow. We got media day today, so much more content coming to IlliniInquirer.com. Probably a depth chart update later this week. And I got to start thinking about our over-unders, Joey, on our site. And then for stats this season, I'm starting to think about what my season prediction is going to be. I got to start putting that together. So that's all coming up at Illini Inquirer. If you're not a VIP member now, sign up for 50% off. It's more than $60 of savings. What's up?
You're just doing like real stuff. Like I got to figure out what my season predictions are going to be. How are people going to answer? Like we got to answer some over-unders, which is a really fun part. And I'm sitting here like, who my sign guy is going to be? Like you've got real stuff, and I'm out here just in left field trying to figure out a sign guy. What's the bold?
We got a sign guy podcast coming up. I'm looking forward to it.
Pressured in the bold prediction because I hit on Pat Bryant last year. I'm still workshopping a little bit of that. Like I'm having fun thinking some of this stuff, and you're like, man, how am I gonna? What's the win total gonna be? And I'm just hanging out in fun land, man.
Well, bold predictions. We've been ruminating on some of those. So the point is a lot coming up, not only on the podcast, but on the VIP side of things. So go sign up for a VIP membership.
Yeah, it's also media day today. And I know we've talked about that a lot, but this is a really good chance to talk to a lot of guys, to have actual conversations, right? Because people are going to be spread out. Media members are going to be spread out. And you can really sit down, have some conversation. We've had stories that we're really proud of, Jeremy, that have come out of media day. So another reason, if you're not part of the VIP subscription, take advantage of that now, because it's something that you and I really enjoy this day, talking to some of the freshmen, talking to some of the depth guys, talking a little bit more in depth with guys that you know that maybe you don't know their full story. So just please, if you can consider it, take advantage of that VIP deal, because I'm really hopeful for some good content to come out of media day.
All right, later this week, Eric Bossy is going to join me, talk about Illinois' recent basketball commits. We'll talk about Illinois basketball a little bit, but Joey and I will start wrapping up our position previews. We've got linebackers and outside linebackers, DBs, and, of course, Robbie Disher's special teams unit. He'll be happy as we break down the long snapper situation for Illinois. But for Joey Wagner, I'm Jeremy Werner. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer podcast.